Hi ladies. We're going to do a little bit of Alexander work before we get into dance movements. So I'm going to take this video and talk a little bit about two things primarily, the head-spine connection, the head-neck connection, so we can find a proper free poise of the head on the spine by understanding, and also a little bit about the jaw and how the jaw is a separate piece from the skull or from the head itself, so that we can use our bodies a little bit more correctly and advantageously when we're singing. I'm used to doing this mostly with dancers, but it doesn't really matter what activity we're involved in. The understanding of the head poise on the spine can help us to do everything with more ease and to help create better sound and better ease in your movement. So when we're having our warm-ups at chorus, it's not possible to get into these little details, and so we can continue with postural or poise problems as we're doing our warm-ups and as we're doing our singing. And it's difficult enough trying to do all the things we want to produce good sound and to do things the way we want to do them. If your neck is tense or your head is pulled down and you're straining, then it's fighting a losing battle. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Alexander technique. Some of you have heard a little bit about it, and it's best done with a little bit of hands-on work also, where you can be guided to feel. But one of the primary things we want to understand is that how you think can create a very different presentation of how you move, how you understand your body and how you understand your alignment. William Conable was the cello chair at Ohio State University, and also he was an Alexander teacher, and he came up with the concept of body mapping and how body mapping works with the Alexander technique. The Alexander technique, finding ease, and particularly everything based on core movement, which is understanding that the head leads the spine, and if the poise of the head and there's tension in the neck, if that's working that way, there's always going to be problems everywhere else. But he expanded on that and found that how we think about our body, how we understand where our joints are, is how we tend to move. So for instance, if we think that the wrist moves by itself and we don't understand that the wrist is actually moving because of the radius moving around the bones, right? So the wrist movement here in this rotation is actually from the elbow. So for instance, if we're playing an instrument and we're trying to move our wrist without the understanding of how we're really constructed, we can have all kinds of injuries. So one of the first things we misunderstand is where the head is poised on the spine. And many times when I ask this of my students, they'll point somewhere around the chin or here, the back of the head, which is way too low. And I will show some pictures, some drawings of the spine so you can understand that. So in not understanding how high the head is poised on the spine, we can tend to get a lot of excess tension in our neck. The other thing we misunderstand is what it means for the head to move up or to keep our head up. And we tend to think that this is our head up. In Alexander, we actually call that's a classic downward pull. Now there's a difference in looking up by extending through the neck and in looking up with a downward pull. So I'm smashing the vertebrae in my neck, and here I'm lengthening and then going into extension. Obviously we're not going to sing in extension, but we do sometimes see amongst us singers putting their head in this position, keep their head up. And so we've done some of these exercises. You know, Joy always had us measure with our fingers there. That's a method of keeping the head in a conversational position. But let's understand that a little bit better so that we can do that without the crutch and then we understand what we're doing. You can be doing this exercise and still put a lot of excess tension into your neck. So I'm going to talk first about the jaw so that we understand that the jaw is separate from the skull. Stand up. We understand that the jaw has a hinge right here, And the jaw is free of the head, free of the skull. The skull itself is one piece, and then the jaw is separate. So if the head is moving like this, thinking that our head and our jaw work that way, we're going to have also excess tension and pinching here in the throat. So realize that the jaw moves separately and drops away. So you can, I don't like to say keep your head in a certain position, because it's more like keeping a buoyancy and a poise in the head-neck relationship, but allowing the jaw to move away from the skull and not letting the head itself try to produce the movement. So that's one thing. Just knowing that helps us to use that more correctly. So then where does the head balance on the spine? If you put your fingers in your ears, and then you put your fingers through right at the top of the nose here to the back, where those two places intersect is roughly where the head is balanced on the spine. Thinking about it from the ears, which is much higher than most people think. They think it's down lower. And if you imagine it down lower, then the top joints are not free. Because as Bill developed in his body mapping, we tend to move the way we think we're constructed. So a couple of exercises that we can do for that is the nod, very, very small nod. What I'm doing here is just being aware of that little joint up there between my ears. And then the no, just taking the head back and forth. Very, very small, not these big dramatic movements. So once you get into these big dramatic movements, now the entire cervical spine, all of those vertebrae are rotating, and we can lose the awareness of turning from the top joint, and then sequentially the spine follows it. So hopefully you can find a little bit more ease by doing the nodding and doing the no. But if I were in classic downward pull, when I start doing that, I'm using a lot of extra muscular tension there. So one of the ways I'll do this with my students is to take the skull and just rock it forward. So the connection of the head and spine is back further than we think, and the center of gravity in the head is more forward than we think. So if we let that center of gravity work a little bit to the front of our skull, we can feel then the neck is lengthened, the extenders are lengthened. Now to do that with ease, we don't have muscular feelings. Some of my students have had trouble over the years saying, well, people always tell me to stretch my neck, stretch my spine, stand up straight, and all these things are putting extra tension. So what we're trying to do is find the right poise by understanding the anatomy and understanding the gravity helping your head to move up and forward, is what we say in Alexander, instead of down and back. Now see, my chin is up, so I may think that I have my head up, but I've collapsed my spine. What's the matter, girl? All the animals today are... Okay, buddy, it's just the cat. It's just the cat. It's just the cat. I'll do a little work on the floor also, so we can have a better sense of alignment. Most of us have postural problems that we've developed over the years, maybe from slouching at a desk or from working on the different devices that we have, sitting in bad chairs, and even the way you were handled as a baby. If your spine was not worked into its extension, if you were always in a rounded position, then you've got a collapse here of the breathing mechanism, and usually the downward pull is part of that. And then we have the other problem of trying to stand up straight, which is really pushing the chest out. So that's also creating undue tension. So what we're trying to find is this feeling of up and back, through our back, forward through the head. So this may feel as though your head is down, if you're used to putting your chin up, your head itself is actually down. So it's the opposite of that to there. And then you can do the little head wobble to try to sense the upper joints. So we'll look at a couple of pictures there. I'm going to talk about also the breathing and the poise of the rib cage in another video. Today we'll just look at this head-neck connection and hopefully the sense of freedom that you can have there. You cannot have relaxation and openness here if you've got tension there. So I'll move on to some of the pictures in the book, and then that will be enough for our first session. Hi puppy, are you helping mommy? You have your baby? The book I'm going to use for reference today is Robin Gilmore's book, What Every Dancer Needs to Know About the Body. But we have plenty of Alexander books on singers, and of course the books are helpful if you have some additional training and work to understand. Where I find them especially helpful for students is in having a picture. I had the pleasure of working with Robin at the Ohio State University. Every Christmas they have an Alexander workshop, and it is mostly musicians and singers that come. So here's a drawing of the head, and the reason I'm looking at this is for us to see how high the bottom of the skull is in relationship to the jaw, and also to see this separate bone here that is the jaw. I don't have a drawing in this book of removing the jaw from the rest of the skull, but we can just imagine that. And then we're going to look here at the joints we were talking about and the balance. Now the center of gravity is a little bit more forward, but the poise point where the spine meets the head, you can see very close to the ear there, and actually the base of the skull is on the same plane as the upper teeth, not the chin or the lower teeth or the jaw. That's where it moves separately. So if you nod your head up and down the way you normally do, and then nod your head up and down, realizing where that balance point is, same thing with turning your head, you can make some changes. Take a good look there at the neck structure for a moment. Now this is that joint, the atlas joint, that right is in this tiny little space. And then we're going to look at the base of the skull from above, and so you can see the space there where the spine and the head would connect, and it's just to the back of the soft palate. So when you nod your head, go there with that awareness. That's what we're really talking about, is making changes by being mindful and actually understanding your structure. I don't have a good picture here of the downward pull, but I'll look if I may have one. Here's a closer view. That's the joint. You see where the jaw is joined to the skull. Here we have a picture of what I demonstrated earlier, where someone is looking up with a downward pull of the head. You can see that looks very painful. And looking up with ease, and that's through lengthening rather than pressing into the neck. So I hope this helps a little bit. This is something we want to work with over time, and we have to be constantly aware of how we're using ourselves and using our instrument when we're singing or even in daily activities, because we get into this downward pull quite easily, especially in our modern lives where we're not as active outside doing the things that more primitive peoples would always do. So I'll get on with some of the discussion now, a little bit of the rib cage and the poise of the spine in our next video, because that's also extremely important. Okay, have fun with that, ladies. Bye for now.